Praise be to Jesus Christ and welcome to Catholic Forum. I'm your host, Deacon Jim Thorndale. I want to welcome all those who are watching us on public TV and those who might be joining us on podcast. I think of words that really kind of stir up some emotions in us and some things that really start to make us think. I think of the word, if I say taxes, we immediately get an image of what it means to have taxes imposed on us. I think of the word marriage, and in today's world, there's many understandings of marriage. If I said the word healthcare, we would all have a different definition of what it means and what it means to initiate that. But I think in today's society, there is a word that's going on right now, and that word is Common Core. It's an educational process and I would say a ladder that we're trying to reach in understanding what it means to raise our children in a particular way in our schools. And I thought, who better to help us understand what Common Core is than the superintendent of the Catholic Schools, the Diocese of Grand Rapids, Dave Faber. Dave, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me, Jim.
Pleasure to have you here.
Appreciate it.
You know, I think you heard those words I brought up, and they all are, in some way, have controversy around them. And
yes.
the reality of it is, many times the controversy is based on what we don't know. And I would hope today that we can kind of clarify what this Common Core is about, because I think there's a lot of misunderstanding about what it is and the objective of Common Core.
Right.
So help us out a little bit today.
Well, I'm glad you used the word misunderstanding, and I would add to it misinformation.
Okay.
You know, there's just a tremendous amount of unfortunate misinformation out in the media about Common Core. And I think that is stirring up a tremendous amount of fear and anxiety among parents that probably is not necessary.
Okay.
So the Common Core itself is it's called the Common Core State Standards, and I think that's really important. If you separate state standards from the Common Core, you immediately misunderstand perhaps where it's coming from.
Okay.
So Common Core State Standards means that it was initially developed by the states as a result of the State Governors Association. So all the states came together and they said, you know, we can bring together more talent if we all work together and put together a high quality set of educational standards, academic standards. These are things we want students to know and be able to do by the time they reach 12th grade, so that, or by the time they're ready to graduate from 12th grade, so that they're college and career ready is what
Let me ask you this question. Would any of the governors on this who are putting this have more power over the others, or were they all of equal footing? In other words, with California being a huge state, maybe Maine being a small state, would they have equal voice in this decision?
That's a really good question, and Jim, I'm not sure the answer to that question. I wasn't there, so hard to tell if any one state brought forward educational experts that led the way. But there were educational experts that were brought from all over the country who came to be a part of this process, including organizations like ACT, very well recognized test in the United States for kids going on to college. Almost all, in the Midwest, almost all of our students take the ACT test. So ACT was a part of the development of these standards. And then again, they were developed from the 12th grade all the way back down, a backward design, we call it, with the end in mind, to the kindergarten grade. So they're a high quality set of educational or academic standards.
So when these standards are set, they were set out by the governors, not by the federal government. They were put out in a collaborative effort from the governors and then presented as a national program for Common Core.
And some of the misunderstanding stems from, and it's easy to understand, the federal government recognized the work that was going on by the states, and you've probably heard of Race to the Top.
Yes, I have.
Race to the Top is a federal program designed to help us compete globally. And if you look at our scores internationally on international academic achievement tests, the United States scores 16th in reading and 30th in math. You know, now, most people would not be satisfied with that.
And I don't want to say it's a big problem, but it is a part of the issue, is that I firmly believe that in the last 10 years there's been a bit of a dumbing down in our educational system, in our public schools, and we need to bring that up, and perhaps that was Common Core is shooting for.
We need to raise academic expectations, and there's no question In fact, there's consensus from about 48 of the 50 states that the Common Core state standards are higher academic expectations than existed previously in previous versions of state standards, which were truly all different around the country. So every state designed their own state standards. Some states would clearly collaborate, but most of the time each state had its own state standards. This, as a result of the National Governors Associations, all the states coming together, is one set of high-quality standards that's now been adopted by 45 states in the United States.
So that's applied equally then in those 45 states. What about the other states that don't comply? Do they have to comply?
So they will have, no, they do not. They do not. They have to have their own state standards that they will use. But the reason that people got confused is Race to the Top was there to address how do we help our students compete on that international level? How do we raise our test scores from being ranked 16th in reading and 30th in math to somewhere in the more respectable range? So they took a look at what are the top schools or top nations who are scoring well on these international achievement tests, what are they doing? And really tried to fashion these standards around what some of those highly successful international or countries are doing.
And we do need to be more aggressive in our education if we're going to compete in this global world.
No question.
That's absolutely a necessity. My question is this, is that we fall, being Catholics, we have our Catholic education, we fall in a little different category than the public schools.
Yes, we do.
I'd like to address today not just the Catholic education, but how do we comply, or what's our obligation to the understanding of Common Core?
So we have no obligation to the Common Core. The Common Core is like any other quality set of academic standards. It allows us, as Catholics, to take a look at what those are. We have today the Common Core state standards. We have our previous state standards. We have the ACT college readiness standards. We have international academic standards. We have the ISTE or technology standards. We have the next generation science standards. There are so many sets of standards out there, and Catholic schools have the freedom. That's the beauty of being a Catholic school. We have the freedom to take a look at all of those standards and take and apply those that are most helpful to our mission.
Dave, I think you also clarified another point, is that it doesn't apply to all of the educational system, or of all the courses, of all the curriculum. What does it apply to primarily?
So the Common Core state standards are only standards for math and English language arts. So math and English language arts, trying to address those two areas once again. And I want to come back to that. The Race to the Top, so the federal government funded Race to the Top grants. And I think they were to the tune of like $350 million for one and $400 million for another. And what those grants did was they said, we already see this high quality activity happening among the states to create new standards. How can we assist? So the federal government created these granting opportunities and to organizations that would create for us assessments to measure whether or not schools are meeting those standards. So that's where the federal government got involved in the assessment of those standards.
That makes sense. Now, again, going back then to Catholic education, you must look at this collaboratively with a lot of people and see what's going on within the Common Core and what might be applicable to our Catholic education.
Yes. Dioceses all over the country have been looking at the Common Core state standards as one of a number of different standards in order to create the best possible learning environment for our students. And some dioceses, you know, particularly some of the larger dioceses who have a lot of transient students, students in and out of their system and into the public system, who looked at those probably first. And we call it unpacking them or unwrapping them. In other words, you're going to set these standards next to the ones you're currently using and say, how do they compare? What are the differences? And one of the realities about the Common Core state standards is that they are a raising of the academic standards for our public schools. And we ought to applaud that effort in our public schools, raising academic standards, trying to make the learning much more integrated, trying to make the learning much more high-level thinking skills, actually making it real-life problem solving, trying to really up our game in many, many ways.
Sure. Now, I do know that Catholic education excels in many ways. I mean, we rate academically very high throughout the nation in Catholic education. Our children are academically wonderful when it comes into entrance to college. So when you're looking at these Common Core, are they at our level, above our level, or are there certain things that we can achieve through those Common Core initiatives?
Well, if you look at the statistics on Catholic education, and I love to bring these up.
I know you do.
I'm always glad you asked me about them. But, you know, Catholic education is second to none, and I mean that literally in terms of the research on educational practice. So Catholic schools graduate, first of all, more students than any other, at a higher rate than any other educational institution out there.
And that includes other parochial schools?
99%. We graduate 99%. Wow. Other religious schools, it's 97.8 or something like that. When you talk about other private schools, it's around 95%. And when you talk about public schools, it's right around 87%.
So we lead the way.
We absolutely lead the way. And it also is true for the number of students that we send to four-year colleges. So we send 85.7% of our students onto four-year colleges.
Amazing.
That's not counting community college, it's not counting technical school or military service. So we send 85.7% onto four-year colleges. The closest that any other school system comes to that is the other religious schools send 63 or 62 point some percent of their students onto four-year colleges. Other private schools, it's only about 51% of their students, and the public schools under 40%. So again, the Common Core state standards are trying to get all kids ready for college and career. In Catholic schools, we've been getting students ready for college for a very long time because of the core, really, of Catholic education, which I know is what we want to get to today.
You know, Dad, I'm thinking of what you said about we have applies to our public schools. I would think that many of the lower income, social and economically deprived people don't even get in a lot of times to trade schools and other trades, plumbing, electric. I would think raising a standard like Common Core would give them opportunities, because we desperately need trades.
Absolutely.
And we have to be educated to get into those trades.
Absolutely. That's why it's trying to address college and career ready. College and career ready. And it really is a phenomenal effort to raise state standards across the country in order to help our students compete really better at the global level. All students compete better at the global level. But you know, as public schools look at how they're raising the standards, Catholic schools have the same responsibility to take a look at our standards in comparison to these standards and the other standards that are out there. And again, prepare an education which is best suited to meet our unique mission. And you know, I want to talk about the difference of a Catholic education. As you said, we're not compelled in any way, shape, or form to adopt, adapt, or utilize the Common Core state standards. However, they're an excellent educational tool, just like the many other standards that are out there. And it behooves us to take a look at them. So Catholic education at its core, first and foremost, does not start with some standards. It starts with the core of who we are. And the core of who we are is that we are at the heart of the mission of the church. We are an extension of the mission of the church, to go and make disciples, right? So our whole intent of Catholic schools is to make disciples and in turn help our students go and make disciples. And we do that by teaching them first and foremost that they're created in the image and likeness of God, that they have inherent human dignity because they're created in His image and likeness with a purpose, that they have gifts and talents that they're supposed to, as stewards of all the gifts that God has given to them, to use and to benefit the world, not just themselves,
you know something,
but everyone.
That is a Common Core for everyone. It really is, but we don't teach it everywhere. But it really is the very substance of who we are as human beings,
It
which
sure
we
is.
teach in there. So I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I thought about that, and it's really it's a shame that we can't be more open about the Lord Jesus in our schools.
Well, this is the beauty of a Catholic education. It is the difference of a Catholic education. It is completely integrated.
Yes.
Math, science, social studies, reading, English, every subject. It's not just religion class. It's every subject from a Catholic worldview, from a Catholic viewpoint, from that reality that we're created in the image and likeness of God, that all of this He placed here and put in order for us to be stewards of and to use these gifts. And then put on top of it that we get the opportunity to introduce our young people to an encounter with Christ every day. 35 plus hours. If you're in high school, more like 45 hours a week. If you're in any kind of extracurricular activity, that we have that in a meaningful way to integrate the faith in a complete and integrated way all day long.
Amen.
Then we get to nurture that with the sacraments, of course. The scriptures, of course. And prayer, of course, the community support and service. All of these things are integral to who we are. That's the core of Catholic education. Now, standards, all the standards just kind of inform our practice.
That's right.
So we don't have to adopt the Common Core state standards. We look at the Common Core state standards as a part of the total package of who we are, and they inform our practice, just like other standards. To put them together in such a way that we are delivering that mission, the mission of a Catholic education, if fully integrated.
What I want to do is I want to really go back to what you said and really give some parents comfort, maybe Catholic parents who are watching or other denominations who are watching or think about coming into a Catholic school. Common Core can never take away those values that you said about speaking of the Lord Jesus Christ in everything we do. That is not within the prerogative of the Common Core. So we stay autonomous in that respect. But we look at Common Core as the value that it can bring to education, not only in Catholic schools, but to to public schools.
Absolutely.
And evaluate it on its substance.
Our goal in Catholic schools is to take best practice, to look at best practice, and to utilize it for the good of our mission. That's our goal. It's as simple as that. Now, there are three reasons that we kind of get in trouble in that I would like to talk about.
Please.
That families, I think, part of the reasons why the Common Core may be frustrating to Catholics, and they may be concerned about it. So the three principles that we operate on that I think are applicable to this discussion. Obviously, we're created in the image and likeness of God. Each one of us has a human dignity. And we believe in the principle of subsidiarity. The principle of subsidiarity is that you want decisions to be made at the most local level, where they impact, where the people who they impact have as much opportunity to make a change. That's the principle of subsidiarity. And we we live by that principle in Catholic schools. And part of the problem with the Common Core was it was this group of experts, right, who all came together from all of the states, and they put this together. And now a lot of school districts are just implementing them. Right? We're implementing them, which means they were kind of handed over to teachers. Teachers who have dignity and human value, because they're created in the image and likeness of God, and they begin given a creativity, and they know the business that they do, and as a result, no person who's professionally trained likes to be handed something and told, you have to do this now. So again, one of the beauties of Catholic educators and one of the responsibilities that we have is to take all of these standards, bring them before our Catholic trained teachers, our trained catechists, who are also trained certified teachers, and ask them to take a look at these in light of their practice and implement that which is helpful to their own curriculum standards and curriculum itself. And so that's part of the rub, I think, to some degree in some public schools. These are just being implemented.
Because I just said nobody likes to have something forced upon them and said this is how you'll have to act or how you have to teach. And so it becomes a bit of a standoff at that point. And you can start to build a resistance to it even without understanding it. And I think that's what's happened. You've probably sat in front of many parents and had these conversations.
I sure have. And that's the third of the principles that we live by in Catholic schools, and we certainly live by more than three, but that are applicable to this conversation. And that is that we believe that parents are the first and primary educators of their kids.
Right.
And so when you're having this conversation and a parent is concerned about it, they need more information. They need to understand how it is that we go about creating Catholic school curriculum.
Yeah.
And part of the problem too that some parents I think are having with this Common Core kind of came from this group of experts. It got handed down and now it's being implemented, and parents really had they don't have a really good understanding of what it is.
Exactly.
And what it can do for my kids.
You know, Dave, and a lot of the fear comes in we're in a world today where the government seems to want to take more control. And when people first heard of this Common Core, I think most people assumed it was from the federal government rather than from the states. And so the first thing they do is get a pushback because they don't want that much government interference in their child's education. Clarify that a little bit again, because I think it's vital to this discussion.
Right. So the State Governors Association is where it originated, and that project was carried out. Then the federal government, and this is kind of a large overview, but then the federal government recognized the work that was being done at the state level among the Governors Association, and through Race to the Top funds provided grants for two major companies to develop assessments, standardized assessments that would help measure whether or not kids were actually performing to those standards.
Yeah, okay.
So that's how the federal government got involved. And you know, there are a couple of other things that make it a little controversial to parents. There are these the standards themselves, and I would dare say that if most people opened up the standards, went to the Common Core website and read the standards themselves, they'd say, of course, I want my kids to know how to add, subtract, multiply, divide, read, write, speak, listen, all of the things that are related to math and English language arts.
Yeah.
But there's a set of exemplars, these are examples. So these are materials that can be used to teach these standards.
Got it.
And among some of those hundreds and hundreds, probably thousands of exemplars, are a few that have been determined by some different, from Catholic people really, that these are not appropriate.
Okay.
And they really are not appropriate in Catholic schools.
At least in our Catholic education.
But that has never changed. Catholic schools have always selected the materials that are best suited to meet our mission in our Catholic schools. And so we've never shied away from having to sometimes, nope, that one's not going to be included in our educational process. And that remains true today. Even if a Catholic school or Catholic diocese somewhere around the country is adapting Common Core state standards, that does not mean that they are using all the exemplars.
Right.
They're using their own examples that their own teachers have put together and said, this is the best way to teach this.
And it certainly doesn't mean they're bringing in the whole program of Common Core.
Exactly.
It may be just a smaller portion of it. You
Very
know,
true, Jim.
Another thing that I really want the viewers to understand is that this is not a political issue. These governors are Democrats and Republicans, maybe some libertarians, who have come together for a common cause, for a Common Core. And so I would want people to understand that this is a non-political issue, really. It's about the best for our children.
Right. It's a raising of the bar of educational standards in the United States. And ultimately it really is. There's one other piece that gets some controversy, and that is that there are these recommendations for reading materials. So we traditionally have had fiction and nonfiction, informational text and reading for pleasure kind of thing. And of course in schools we love the reading for pleasure, and our kids really do, and we've often taught the classics in our Catholic schools, and we still are, and most public schools still are as well. But there are recommendations for our students do not read informational text well. And we score extremely low across the country on informational text. And so trying to encourage kids to do more reading of informational text, and many parents are afraid that means their kids will be reading less of the classics and less of those things that they learned morals and values through. And again, in Catholic schools, we don't have to follow any of those guidelines. We can follow the guidelines that we find to be most effective with the kids that we serve.
You know, Dave, in the time we have left, I just want to, hopefully we've relieved some of the fears that parents are having about Common Core, and we've brought some clarity to an understanding that this is something meant to really raise our children and their standards of learning, and yet the Catholic schools really have the liberty and the understanding that we can take a look at it and scrutinize it, what is best for our children.
We will always look at goodness, truth, and beauty.
Of course.
We'll always look at right and wrong, good and bad.
Yes.
Those things will never change in our Catholic schools because they're part of the mission of the church. Yeah. We're just an extension of making disciples, and you can't make disciples without the foundations of our Catholic faith. And that's where we begin.
Because we're called to be citizens of the world.
Absolutely.
In good Catholic, in good moral standing. Okay, that being said, where can parents get more information on Common Core? Where would you send them to?
Well, we're going to send them to the Diocese of Grand Rapids website to watch this interview.
Wonderful.
If they haven't done that, that's one
Wonderful.
thing. That can help.
Okay.
There is certainly a tremendous amount of information out in the media on Common Core. However,
because the fear is you can go online and you can get a lot of misunderstanding on what it means.
You certainly can. In fact, the media has characterized most Catholic schools as either rejecting the Common Core or adopting the Common Core, and most aren't doing either. In fact, none have rejected, and I don't know any who have adopted it in total either. So really what Catholic schools are doing is taking these and applying them as best to meet their mission.
And we're discerning.
Absolutely.
That's what we do as Christians. We discern what is best and then implement.
Absolutely. But I would tell people, going back to where to get good information, go to the source. Actually go to the Common Core website.
Okay.
If you type in the Common Core state standards, there is a website and you can access all the standards. Go right to the standards themselves and start to read the standards. I would dare say that most people would not find issue with the standards themselves. Most people would say, well, yeah, I'd like my children to be able to do that. And that's the place. Always go to the source documents and leave some of the commentary that comes through someone's article.
Filters through, yes.
Yeah, leave some of that because it can really get people anxious and uptight. Go right to the source and see for yourself.
You know, Dave, that's really, the Common Core is also can be an understanding for us to educate ourselves, because we need to be able to decipher this stuff and to read through it and understand what it means and how it best is applying to our schools. And then we can make a rational, intelligent decision on what we feel about it. But I think a lot of that hype has been addressed here today on the show, and I would hope that parents would take your recommendation and go to that website and begin to learn about it, because there's some real freedom and wisdom when you understand what the issues are, and that's really what you've been explaining today.
Absolutely, and if your kids are in a Catholic school, if you do see something among the exemplars, or if you hear that there's some atrocious material being used, Catholic schools are not using that material.
Yes.
Be assured.
Thank you.
And if we ever are, if anyone has made that mistake, bring it to their attention, and it should change immediately.
David, I want to thank you. We're running out of time, but it's been wonderful to talk about this. I would hope that people listening would take your advice, go to the website, really start to ask questions, and to really try and discern what it means for this Common Core and what it means to our schools. I want to thank you for being here today. It's always a pleasure to have you here.
It's great
Continue the great
here.
work you're doing for our Catholic diocese. We appreciate it, brother.
Thank you, Jim.
It's been a blessing. And to all our audience, I'd like to say thank you for listening. And as always, we give all praise to Jesus Christ in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
Amen.